My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 34 years old, and for 156 straight weeks, I sent $750 every Friday to the two people who spent most of my life teaching me that love had to be earned. The transfer used to go out during my lunch break at the hospital, usually between checking oxygen lines, calming anxious parents, and calling in medication updates on kids whose families were hanging on by threads. I helped sick children breathe for a living, and every week I still handed money to two adults who never once made my life easier. The morning of my daughter's 7th birthday, I stared at the confirmation screen for that week's payment, then at the pink party dress hanging from our bedroom closet door, and for the first time I felt something colder than resentment. I felt embarrassed. Not for them, for myself. Because deep down, I already knew I was paying people who could not even pretend to care about the little girl waiting all month to see them. Emma had talked about her grandparents all week like they were royalty. She'd set aside 2 extra cupcakes herself, one with blue frosting because she remembered my mother once said blue looked elegant, and one with rainbow sprinkles because she thought my father liked fun things, even though I couldn't remember the last time he'd smiled at anything that didn't benefit him. I kept telling myself they would show up this time, because even selfish people can usually perform kindness when a child is involved. But a part of me knew better. A part of me remembered every ignored school recital, every canceled visit, every excuse that somehow disappeared the second rent, insurance, or groceries were due on their end. I wish I could tell you I saw it clearly before that day, but the truth is uglier. I saw it. I just kept funding it. Before I tell you what happened when I finally asked why they skipped my child's birthday, tell me this. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I really want to know how far this story travels tonight. Emma's party started at 3, and by 2:30 our apartment looked like a child had designed it after being handed unlimited sugar and full creative control. Streamers hung across the ceiling in crooked lines, paper stars were taped to the walls, and the dining table was crowded with tiny sandwiches cut into hearts, bowls of fruit, pink lemonade in plastic dispensers, and a 3-layer strawberry cake I had no business trying to make after 2 overnight shifts in a row. But Emma had asked for something princess fancy. And when your daughter says that with her whole heart, you find energy you don't actually have. She spun through the living room in white socks and that pink dress she had picked out days in advance, clutching a faded Polaroid from the year before. In that picture, she was sitting on my lap at our old kitchen table with a grocery store cake, a paper crown sliding over one eyebrow, and 2 empty chairs behind us that she had insisted we leave open, just in case. She held the photo up and asked me, "Do you think Grandma will wear pink this time so we match?" I smiled so hard it almost hurt. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe she will." Children don't understand emotional absence the way adults do. They just believe the people who are supposed to love them will eventually act like it. That's what makes moments like that unbearable. Her friends came first, loud and joyful and trailing wrapping paper. Then neighbors, then 2 mothers from her dance class, then Vanessa, carrying a giant gift bag and enough warmth to fill every cold space in the apartment. Every time the buzzer sounded, Emma's face lifted with that same instant hope. And every time it wasn't my parents, she recovered too quickly, which somehow made it worse. She never pouted. She never asked, "Where are they?" in front of the guests. She just kept checking the door with a smile that was trying very hard to be brave. At one point, I found her kneeling at the coffee table with crayons spread everywhere, working seriously on a birthday drawing. She had drawn herself, me, balloons, cake, and then 2 taller stick figures with silver hair. "That's for Nana and Grandpa," she said without looking up. "So when they get here, they know where to stand." I had dealt with emergencies at the hospital without freezing. I had spoken calmly to terrified parents while alarms went off around us. But that sentence nearly dropped me where I stood. Still, I kept moving. I poured juice, I cut cake, I tied ribbons around favor bags. I laughed when I needed to laugh and thanked people for coming and fixed a paper tiara that kept slipping off one little girl's head. Outwardly, I looked like a mother hosting a sweet 7th birthday party. Inside, I was counting every minute like it was evidence. By the time Emma stood in front of the cake, hands clasped, eyes shut tight to make her wish, I already knew they were not coming. But she opened her eyes and looked toward the door anyway, before she looked at the candles. That detail stayed with me more than anything else. Not the presents, not the games, not the music. Just a little girl checking one last time to see whether love had decided to arrive late. She laughed through musical chairs, thanked Vanessa for the ridiculous glitter jacket she immediately wanted to wear over her dress, and hugged every friend goodbye like the day had been perfect. But after the last guest left and the apartment went quiet except for the soft squeak of deflating balloons, she came to me holding one untouched blue frosted cupcake and asked, "Did they forget me? Or are they still coming after dinner?" That was the moment the truth stopped being something I could soften for myself. It was no longer about rude parents or disappointment or old resentment. It was about what kind of mother I was going to be next. The kind who kept explaining away cruelty, or the kind who finally called it by its name. After I got Emma bathed, tucked into bed, and half convinced that adults sometimes miss important things but that none of it had anything to do with how lovable she was, I sat alone at the kitchen counter and stared at my phone while the refrigerator hummed too loudly in the silence. The apartment looked like a celebration that had collapsed mid-breath. Torn wrapping paper was still under the table. Pink icing had dried on one of the plates. A single blue frosted cupcake sat untouched near the sink, the one Emma had saved for my mother, the frosting caving slowly inward. I kept looking at it like it might explain something. At 9:42 p.m., I called. My father answered on the 4th ring with the irritated tone of a man who clearly felt interrupted, not ashamed. I didn't start with anger. I didn't accuse or cry or plead. I asked one question, and I asked it quietly. "Why didn't you come to Emma's birthday?" There was a pause, the sound of a television in the background, then my mother's voice somewhere near him saying, "Who is it?" He answered her first, "Natalie." Then he came back on with a short laugh that instantly took me back to every dismissive moment of my childhood. "We weren't needed there," he said. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my fingers hurt. "She waited for you all day." Another pause. Then my mother took the phone, and I swear the worst part was how calm she sounded. No guilt, no discomfort. Just that composed, clipped voice she used whenever she wanted to reduce something painful into something practical. "Natalie, stop making this bigger than it is. We are not arranging our lives around a child's party. Emma means nothing to us in any real sense. You chose to have her. That is your responsibility, not ours." I didn't react right away. My body did, though. Every muscle locked. My breath turned shallow. I could hear my pulse in my ears like a second heartbeat. I asked her the most humiliating question I've ever asked another human being, let alone my own mother. "After everything I do for you, that's really how you see her?" My father came back on, harsher now, probably because he realized she had said the part they usually left implied. "Don't start with the money," he snapped. "Sending money doesn't buy loyalty. You help because you're supposed to help. We raised you. You still owe us. And don't expect us to play doting grandparents just because your kid wants attention." Your kid, not Emma, not your daughter, not our granddaughter. Just your kid, like she was a random burden I had dragged into their sightline. And with that, 100 ugly memories started lining up in my head so fast, they almost felt choreographed. The time Emma had a fever of 103, and I called my mother from urgent care because I had already missed too much work and needed someone to sit with us for an hour. And she said, "I'm not spending my afternoon around sick children." The Christmas they arrived 3 hours late, left early, and still reminded me before leaving that their heating bill was impossible this month. The recital they promised to attend, then skipped because my father didn't want to deal with parking. The birthday card they signed for Emma last year with no gift, no message, and a cash request tucked into the same envelope for themselves 3 days later. Suddenly, everything made sense in the ugliest possible way. I had not been supporting parents who were struggling and emotionally distant. I had been financing two people who felt entitled to me and indifferent to my child. That distinction changed everything. While my father was still talking, still explaining duty to me like I was an employee refusing overtime, I opened my banking app. My hands were shaking so badly I almost mistyped my password twice. The weekly transfer was sitting there, neat and routine and disgustingly normal. $750 every Friday, like clockwork. I canceled it. Then I canceled the backup automatic transfer I had set up months earlier in case my shifts got too chaotic and I forgot. Then, because something deeper than anger had finally taken over, I moved the next 3 months of what would have gone to them into a new savings account under Emma's name. I labeled it Emma College Fund before I could second-guess myself. My mother was still speaking in the background, accusing me of dramatics, saying I was twisting words, but her voice had started to sound far away. My whole body was vibrating, but not from indecision, from clarity. 40 minutes after my parents told me my child meant nothing to them, the money stopped. Not paused, not reduced, stopped. And for the first time in years, I realized that cutting someone off is not always an act of anger. Sometimes it is the first honest sentence you have spoken in a very long time. I woke up the next morning feeling as if I had slept inside a storm. My chest was tight, my eyes burned, and for one disorienting second, I forgot what had happened. Then I saw the pink birthday banner still drooping across the living room and remembered all of it at once. Emma padded into the kitchen in dinosaur pajamas, hair wild, voice soft with sleep, and asked if she could have waffles for breakfast, because birthdays should last at least 2 days. I said yes immediately, because if there was one thing I understood with painful clarity now, it was that childhood should not have to carry adult damage any earlier than necessary. I made waffles, packed her lunch, braided her hair, and watched her walk into school with that same pink backpack and the same trusting little wave she always gave me before disappearing through the doors. I sat in the car afterward longer than usual, hands on the steering wheel, and let myself actually feel what I had done. The grief surprised me less than the relief. I had expected to feel guilt first, maybe panic. Instead, I felt like someone had cut a wire that had been buzzing under my skin for years. At 10:17, my phone lit up. My mother. One text. "Send the money today. HOA payment is due and your father's card already bounced." I read it once, then again. No mention of Emma, no shame, no correction, no, "we shouldn't have said that." Just logistics, just demand. A second text came less than a minute later. "We are not discussing last night. We said what we said in frustration. Don't behave irrationally over emotions." I actually laughed in my car, a sharp, ugly laugh that startled even me. Over emotions, as if a child waiting all day for grandparents who later declared she meant nothing was some hormonal misunderstanding I was making too dramatic. As if their dependence on my money was practical and my daughter's pain was theatrical. I typed 3 different replies and erased them all. Then I sent the only version that felt clean enough to stand by later. "You made your position clear. I'm making mine clear too. There will be no more money. Do not contact Emma. I wish you the life you chose." The three little dots appeared immediately, disappeared, then reappeared. Before she could even finish typing, my father called. I let it ring. Then my mother called. Then my father again. Then a number from the local bank branch they used. I stared at my screen and felt something inside me harden in the healthiest possible way. By noon, my father had left a voicemail. His voice sounded different now. Still angry, but threaded with panic. "Natalie, you do not get to do this without warning. We counted on that money. You can't destabilize people like this because of one emotional overreaction. Call me back before you make this worse." Worse. That word sat with me all day. Worse than what? Worse than teaching my daughter that people can insult her, ignore her, take from her mother and still deserve unlimited access because they share DNA? Worse than spending years rewarding emotional neglect with direct deposit? Worse than watching a 7-year-old glance at the front door while blowing out her birthday candles? Around 2, my mother changed tactics and sent a longer message, full of sacrifice and guilt and carefully polished distortion. She wrote that they had done everything for me growing up, that children should not punish aging parents for one bad conversation, that my duty did not disappear because my feelings were hurt. She even added, "You know how much pressure your father is under right now," as if stress were a permit for cruelty. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my budgeting app and looked at what my life would look like without that weekly transfer leaving my account. It was almost offensive how obvious it became. More savings, more breathing room, more margin for Emma, a real emergency fund, better after-school programs, maybe dance camp this summer without calculating which bill I would have to delay. Maybe braces next year without dread. Maybe simply living without that Friday ritual of wiring money to people who treated me like a utility. The longer I stared at the numbers, the angrier I got, not because I had cut them off, but because I had waited this long. At 4:06, another voicemail came in. My father again, no longer pretending this was about morality. "If you don't send something by tonight, we are going to have problems here." There it was. The truth again, simpler this time. They were not grieving the relationship. They were grieving the interrupted revenue. And once I saw that clearly, I understood something I wish I had learned 10 years earlier. Some people never confuse love with money because, to them, love has always just been the most effective way to ask for money. That afternoon, I picked Emma up from school, took her for ice cream for no reason except that I could, and listened to her explain in exhausting detail why mint chocolate chip was a grown-up, brave flavor. She laughed, she talked. She asked whether we could do a little birthday redo on the weekend, with just fun people this time. And sitting there across from her in that plastic booth, I knew I had already chosen correctly. Not because it was easy, not because it didn't hurt, but because for once, I was no longer confusing endurance with love. I hadn't planned to go to their townhouse, but 3 days of nonstop calls, voicemails, and guilt-drenched messages from extended relatives pushed me there. Not because I needed closure. Closure is a luxury phrase people use when they've never had to fight for basic emotional truth. I went because I wanted them to hear my decision in person, without a screen to hide behind, without the power to rewrite my tone or crop my words. Their place looked exactly like it always had. Trimmed hedges they couldn't afford to maintain, a brass welcome sign polished to death, and the kind of front porch that screamed stability from a distance while everything underneath it was rotting. My mother opened the door before I knocked the second time. Her face hardened when she saw I had come alone. "So you finally decided to act like an adult," she said. I stepped inside and saw overdue notices stacked under a decorative bowl in the entryway. That told me more than her voice did. My father came in from the kitchen already angry, already rehearsed. "You've embarrassed us," he said. "Your aunt called, asking why your mother was crying. Do you know what that does to people at our age?" I looked at him for a second and almost admired the technique. He said our age, like age itself, entitled them to my income. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That our daughter cut us off because we missed one party." My mother snapped. "Which is true." "No," I said. "The truth is, you told me my daughter means nothing to you. The truth is, you've taken money from me every week while treating Emma like an inconvenience. The truth is, you expected me to keep paying after saying the quiet part out loud." My father stepped closer. "You are blowing one sentence out of proportion." "Which sentence?" I asked. "The part where she means nothing, or the part where you said I still owe you?" That landed. For a moment, nobody moved. Then my mother did what she always did when cornered by facts. She escalated volume. "You are selfish. You have always been selfish. Ever since you had that child, everything became about your feelings, your schedule, your life. We needed help. You had the ability to provide it. That's what family does." "No," I said, quieter than her, which made her angrier. "That's what exploitation does. Family does not tell a 7-year-old she's unwanted without saying it to her face. Family does not collect $750 every week and still refuse to show up for cake." My father's expression shifted from outrage to something uglier the moment a person realizes money has actually stopped. "Do you understand what this could do to us?" he asked. "We have obligations, fees. We are behind because we expected—" He stopped himself. Expected. There it was. The whole architecture of the relationship in a single word. Not hoped. Not appreciated. Expected. "You expected me to keep financing your life," I said. "And I expected you to love my daughter enough to show up for 2 hours? Looks like we were both wrong." My mother's eyes narrowed. "If you walk out over this, don't come back when Emma asks why she has no grandparents." That should have shattered me. Instead, it clarified everything. "When Emma asks," I said, "I'll tell her the truth in a way a child can carry. I won't teach her that love is something you have to purchase from people who resent giving it." I turned to leave. My father followed me to the porch and hissed, loud enough for the woman next door watering her plants to hear, "Cutting us off financially at our age is the same as killing us slowly." I faced him for the last time and said, "No, I'm just refusing to die with you." Then I got in my car and drove away, while he stood there speechless, because for once, I had not left him any room to turn me into the villain inside my own mouth. By that evening, the family campaign began. My mother posted a vague paragraph about children who forget the hands that fed them. My father shared a quote about loyalty. 2 cousins sent me careful, guilt-soaked messages asking whether I had maybe overreacted in the heat of the moment. An uncle I hadn't seen in 11 months wrote, "They're old, Nat. Sometimes older people say harsh things. That doesn't mean you let them sink." I nearly threw my phone. The speed with which people will defend abusers once money is involved would be funny if it weren't so exhausting. But I remembered one of the notes I had written to myself after the birthday. "Do not perform your pain for spectators." So I did not reply publicly. I did something better. I chose precision. I sent private messages to 4 relatives who actually knew me, not the theatrical version of me my parents preferred. I sent no speeches, no dramatic screenshots of every insult, just dates, amounts, and facts. I told them I had paid $750 a week for 3 years. I told them my parents skipped Emma's birthday. I told them that when I asked why, they said she meant nothing to them. I told them the payments were over and the subject was closed. That was it. No begging to be believed, no emotional spillage. The truth, clean and stable, has a way of doing damage all by itself. The first person to respond was my Aunt Colleen, my mother's older sister, who texted, "They said that about Emma?" Then Vanessa, who had seen enough over the years to be dangerous with the truth, called me and said, "Do not let them bully you into public defense. The people who matter will come to you." She was right. Within 24 hours, the social media tone shifted. My parents' vague posts stopped getting sympathy and started getting silence. One cousin quietly unfriended both of them. My aunt called my mother, and I later learned that conversation ended with my mother hanging up first, which in our family was basically a public confession. 2 days later, my father left a voicemail that sounded nothing like his earlier outrage. "Natalie," he said, voice flatter now, "this has gotten out of hand. People are misunderstanding things. Maybe we should all sit down and reset expectations." Reset expectations, not apologize. Reset expectations. It would have been laughable if it weren't so revealing. I deleted it. That weekend, Emma and I went to a children's museum, then out for pancakes, then bought sidewalk chalk we did not need. On the drive home, she asked, casually, "Are Nana and Grandpa still busy?" I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and told her, "Yes. And sometimes when people stay too busy for too long, we stop waiting at the door for them." She considered that for a second, then nodded like she understood more than she should. "Okay," she said. "Can Vanessa come to my next birthday instead?" I smiled despite myself. "Absolutely. Children know who shows up. Their loyalty isn't bought by titles. It's built by presence. Mine had taken 34 years to learn that. Hers took one missed party and a little honesty. 3 weeks later, on a warm Saturday afternoon, Emma asked if we could have a redo birthday, not because she wanted more presents, but because she wanted a day that felt all the way happy. So we did. We kept it small on purpose. Just Emma, me, Vanessa, 2 neighborhood friends, a bubble machine from the discount store, cupcakes from a bakery down the street, and music playing through a speaker that kept cutting out every third song. It was imperfect, noisy, bright, and real. Before guests arrived, I opened the kitchen drawer where I had shoved old transfer confirmations, printed receipts, and the legal pad where I had once tracked what my parents owed and what I still felt guilty for not giving. I took the whole stack to the patio with a metal mixing bowl and a lighter. I didn't make a speech. I didn't cry. I watched paper curl into black edges and then into nothing. Emma came to the screen door and asked what I was doing. "Throwing away old mistakes," I said. She accepted that answer immediately, because children don't always need details. They need emotional weather reports. Safe, unsafe, cloudy, clear. Later that day, I found her at the picnic table drawing again. This time, there were no extra tall, silver-haired figures waiting to be added. It was just her, me, Vanessa with giant earrings, and a small cluster of friends holding balloons. At the top, she wrote in uneven capital letters, "My people." I sat down beside her and looked at that page for a long time. That was the moment I knew we were going to be fine. Not because it stopped hurting, not because my parents had changed. They hadn't. In fact, that same evening, as the last guests were leaving, my phone lit up with a video call request from them. I almost ignored it, but something in me wanted to see what desperation looked like when pride finally lost. I answered without speaking. My parents appeared side by side on screen. No polish left, no rehearsed dignity, just strain. My mother looked older than she had a month before. My father looked furious that need had forced him into visibility. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then my mother tried first. "Natalie, this has gone too far." I said nothing. My father leaned forward. "We may lose the townhouse." Still I said nothing. My mother's voice cracked next. "We just need help until we get back on our feet." Help. Not forgiveness, not remorse. Help. Their eyes searched my face for the old reflex, the one that rushed in to save them so I could feel useful instead of loved. It didn't come. I listened for 30 seconds, maybe a little more. Then I heard Emma laughing in the next room while Vanessa taught her how to stack paper plates on her head like hats. That sound cut through the whole performance like light through dirty glass. I finally spoke one sentence. You told me exactly what my child was worth to you, and I believed you. Then I ended the call. 1 minute later, as if the universe had decided subtlety was no longer required, a payment alert from my own bank popped up confirming the monthly auto transfer into Emma's college fund. I stared at that notification and felt something close to peace. Not revenge in the flashy sense, not destruction, just redirection. Money that once went to people who saw my daughter as a burden was now building her future, one deposit at a time. That was the real ending. Not whether they suffered. They did. Not whether relatives judged me. Some still do. The real ending was this. Emma stopped asking about the door. She stopped setting aside cupcakes for people who treated love like leverage. She started drawing the family that actually existed, not the one I kept financing in my imagination. I used to think family meant blood, obligation, and endurance. Now I know better. Family is whoever shows up when there is nothing to gain. Family is whoever can look at a child and see a human being instead of an inconvenience. And the lesson I would leave with anyone living inside a one-sided relationship is this. Never use sacrifice as proof that a bond is healthy. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your child is to end the tradition that taught you to beg for basic care. Saying no did not make me cruel. It made me responsible. It made me a mother. And if one day your child asks why someone with your last name never truly loved them, maybe the bravest answer is not a lie wrapped in respectability. Maybe the bravest answer is this: because some people only know how to love what they can control, and we chose not to belong to them anymore.